This is the Ecom Edge podcast, and I'm your host, Sergio Iacobucci, Director of Product Marketing at Coveo. For all of us in e-commerce, there's a certain thrill that comes from adopting the latest innovations. From peeling back the layers of different technologies to getting inside our customers' heads and providing them with profitable shopping experiences that competitors can't match. And I'd like to welcome Cate Trotter, a top 100 retail influencer and head of trends at Insider Trends. And Cate helps large retailers innovate and implement world-leading profitable retail concepts. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, Cate, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. So I think we'll just kick things off so that everyone gets to know a little bit about you and who we're kind of talking with today. So tell us a little bit about yourself, the businesses that you set up in your 20s and how that's kind of charted your path to where you are today.
Oh, yes. So my 20s were a while ago, but way back when I set up two companies actually at the same time. So I set up the one I'm running now, Insider Trends, which, as you say, looks at the future of retail. We work with some amazing brands. I feel really privileged to work with them. But the other one that I set up, I think it was back in 2007, 2008 maybe, was one called Insider London. So both companies at the start looked at innovative, unusual walking tours. So it all came about because I decided I wanted to become a trend spotter. I realized that the best way to do that was to set up my own business. Because I was quite young, I thought it would be better to have a product at that point than more of a service. So I read about these retail safaris, which are essentially trend tours, and I decided to focus on that. But by working on that, I realized that you could package that up and sell those types of themes to other groups, which is how we got to Insider London, these alternative walking tours. And I don't run that company anymore, but it is still going. They have a very good tube tour.
and what got you into the trend specifically? Like, how come you honed in on that and thought, that's what I want to do?
I just find it fascinating, to be honest. So I was a marketing consultant before then, and we'd talk to people about interesting ideas, but we wouldn't really build so much with people. And that's what I realized I wanted to do. So by focusing on trends and innovation, that's what I think about and talk about all day long, and it's great.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And so, because obviously you've been in retail for a long time now, and you've been speaking at large events, etc. And you often speak about the future of retail and what that's going to bring to retailers, and obviously what that's going to bring to your average customer. So why has that really pulled you in? Like, why has the future of retail become a massive passion of yours? Obviously, it's completely aligned with being a trend spotter, right? But what has really pulled you into that? What gets you excited about it?
Well, should I tell you a secret? The real reason why we focused on that was, business strategy, focusing on the 20% that brings 80% of your results. So again, setting up a business in your 20s, you don't know as much as you possibly could. When I first set up Insider Trends, I said, we talk about the future of anything and everything. It was incredibly ambitious. In my 30s, I realized we were not going to take over the world, and I didn't particularly want to. And we went through and we looked at all the different topics we were making money from. We realized that retail was the top one. And we said, right, until further notice, we are going to focus on this. And actually, since then, it's become so much more interesting because pretty much once a week, I go off and I interview some person at the forefront of retail. I mean, there's 1,000 different aspects of what's at the forefront of retail. But I learn from those people. I double down on my knowledge. I really get to know clients, and it just compounds my knowledge, really. And it's got a lot more interesting ever since we decided to do that. So sorry, it is interesting, but it's not, it was a business decision, that one.
No, that makes sense, right? And I think, that passion leads to a great business. And I think that, your ability to network with a lot of people, see a lot of thought leaders as well, just helps pull together an even better view. And that kind of leads me quite nicely onto what I was thinking next as well. I think people that are there to help spot trends and think about what the future brings, that's quite a hard thing to do, right? Because you need to pick and bet on almost like the right horse, because it's part of your reputation and kind of what you believe the future will be. People will pin that on you. So what's the process you go through if you're trying to identify a good trend? And you're like, this is one I actually want to back and I want to talk about at a bigger event, because obviously you've got a lot of people looking at you and like all want to talk about it afterwards. What's that process look like for you?
So the process for a presentation is different from working with a client, because when you're working with a client, it doesn't really matter what other people are excited by. You need to find out what is the appropriate next step for that client. In a presentation, though, there is a bit of storytelling. Half of a good presentation is being memorable. So sometimes you do focus on things that will wow people. And also something that we're noticing is that the field within retail is widening hugely. Like there are some retailers like Primark who are doing fantastically well out of keeping things within the store, not really thinking that much about digital. And of course, there are other businesses who are investing and experimenting with metaverse concepts. So yeah, it's getting...
The spectrum's huge.
The spectrum is gigantic. And I think at a conference, you would really want to focus on something that people haven't heard before, something that they will remember and take home. So, but we really try to share ideas that will make people money. So we don't just talk about innovation for innovation's sake. And so I think half of that is also just thinking about something and thinking, am I excited about this? So for a conference, does this seem new and different? Would I be excited to present that? But at the same time, you also need to think, would I use it? Do I see the benefits in shopping in this new way? Or would I recommend that a business applies it? Because, there's so many press releases about things that people call innovation, and some of them just won't work. So half of my job is actually editing.
Yeah. And debunking trends, I guess, as well. So, and I think it is interesting, right? If you have that huge spectrum, you've got people that are embracing maybe every element of digital, and even the bits that some of the people that like to think they're at the forefront will be scared to embrace. And then you've got people that just completely focus on their stores and making sure they're getting the logistics of everything right. And they both have successes in their own ways, and they're still able to compete within the market today. And I think that's quite interesting. You can have that spectrum, and depending on the business's focus, obviously we don't know what that means for them, in 10 years, 20 years time, and how those, you would like to think that the ones focused on digital will be the future retailers, but then I suppose you'll never know 100%. But I wanted to ask you a question, and we'll be provocative here. That's the point of this. In your mind, is retail as we know it dead?
Okay. Can I say yes and no?
You can say yes and no.
Talk through this answer. So, I mean, if you even go into London today, or I don't know, I go, and outside of COVID, I've been lucky enough to speak all over the world. And whenever I go and do a speech, I will do my best to take the time to go out and see what's going on in retail in those different cities. And more often than not, retail functions exactly the way that it did 20 years ago. So what someone like me would present on stage is absolutely not what you would see in most normal towns, or even other global cities like London and New York, and a handful of other cities will show you new ideas, but it's not changing as fast as trend spotters might tell you, particularly in the physical store. But my counter argument to this is, if we fast forward 10, 20 years, I'm not sure we will need retail in its traditional state. And I say this because if we think about going into a standard store, there's quite a lot of work involved in that for the customer. Like, I know a lot of people talk about delighting people and experience, but again, I don't see a lot of that in most stores that I visit. Mostly it's just walking up and down aisles of shelves and locating the item that you want yourself. And it's not a particularly inspiring or a particularly efficient experience. And we talk about retail being made up of two functions, really. One is experience or engagement, and the other is logistics. And as we know by seeing all these headlines and all these billion-dollar investments that are going on, logistics and delivery is being transformed as we speak. It's becoming almost frictionless and therefore invisible. So I'm talking about the Gettiers of the world, of course, some of the deliveries, that type of thing. But if we think that the logistics part of retail is collapsing to become invisible, then all that is left to take its place is experience. And that means, retailers really should be focusing on experience, but probably the most reliable way to deliver a truly immersive and exciting experience is through immersive experiential digital experiences, through VR and AR and geolocation, things like that, rather than a store. I'm sure the store will still be relevant to an extent, but we talk a lot about this immersive digital first world that is backed by super fast logistics. And so if you compare that idea to the traditional store experience that we've had since we were born, it's very, very different. So I'm not sure how long leading brands will rely on the traditional store experience.
So I went into a store the other day and they did have something that was new and something I hadn't seen before. And this was, you go into the changing rooms, you put your clothes up on a dedicated hanger, and then on a screen next to it, through RFID tags, it tells you what the garment is that you have, and it tells you can pick a different size and ask a store assistant to bring that out to you. And it's great. And I hadn't seen that before, but I think when you're used to digital and you're used to an e-commerce experience, you kind of almost like expect that in store already, and it's almost a shame that it's taken that long to get to that point. But as a consumer, I'm sort of impressed, but it lasts like a few moments, right? You're like, okay, fine, I can now request a new size. So what is it that you think retailers need to do to really impress consumers going forward from an experiential point of view to make that in-store experience really, really worth it?
A lot of what we talk to our clients about is really just understanding, well, one, where their customers are today, but also the best experiences their customers are having across the board. Because we don't just compare our retail experiences to other retail experiences. We compare our retail experiences to the best experiences we've ever had anywhere. It's hard being a retailer. So we look at different experiences and start to think about how that might upgrade different parts of their experience. But in store, I think the ultimate experience perhaps that we've seen comes from Camp. I don't know if you've seen them. They're actually they're a kids' toy store, and they've got, I think, maybe 9 spaces around America. They've got about 4 or 5 just in New York. But they focus on delivering a fantastic experience for families. And they do sell products as part of that. But really what they try to do is get kids to come into the store and spend time. They might take part in an event which might be free or paid, or they might just end up playing basketball. I think some of the stores have pillars that they're allowed to draw all over. There's so much cool stuff going on in their stores. And if you are in town with your kids. It's where you will take them to let them decompress for an hour or so. So they get people in through the doors because of the experience, and then they sell products off the back of it. But actually, because it's so experiential, they've got two other revenue streams that they have now built out around that. So one is that they sell sponsorships to brands. Mm-hmm. So the last time I was in the New York store, Micro Scooters had set up a mini indoor racetrack, and so there were all these kids scooting around the store.
That sounds amazing.
It was so cool, yeah. And there was a slide that went through the middle of the racetrack that all these kids were queuing to go on. But Micro Scooters had paid to expose their product to all of these kids who would have been in the space anyway. Yeah. And then because kids like being in the space, the third revenue stream is that camp sell tickets to some events, and they've even done it now so you can pay to leave your kids there on date night. You can go off and have dinner with your partner for an hour or two while your kid is looked after and read stories in their pajamas in the store. I think it's amazing. So it's this whole other take on what a store can be, really.
Yeah.
So that's one idea. I mean, I can explain another one.
That's interesting because it blends. That's starting to blend like retail and service kind of together. You know, you're kind of it almost reminds me of like the children like indoor soft plays or adventure playgrounds and stuff, but then they're actually selling their own product in there as well, or sponsored product. It's a clever model, and it definitely blurs the lines between what would be normally a kids toy shop and a soft play center or something that's something for them to do. And it just blends the two together. It's very clever. It's a unique approach.
Exactly. And they've even taken that idea online as well. So I think it was last summer, they ran an online summer camp with all this content for kids all over the country and different activities and things that they could tune in to do. So we also talk to our clients a lot about this, like, leading brands have one or two really simple concepts and principles that work across channels, because the number of different channels and touch points that brands have got is so complicated these days. You need a really strong brand message or principle that can easily connect all your channels and stand out and bring everything that you're doing together.
Exactly. And I think, at Coveo, we love this term of relevance. And I think we're kind of like starting to get to that point now where, what do you think is the number one thing retailers need to do to command relevance and stay relevant in today's market? Because there are lots of different avenues to engaging with your customers now, and it's there's not loads and loads of new things, but there's quite a lot of new things you need to get your head around in order to have a good strategy. What do you think they need to focus on to kind of get that share of relevance within a consumer's mind?
Well, I have a feeling this might be completely different to how you might answer this question, but I would say a relationship with your customers, like a genuine connection. So, and obviously this doesn't work for every retailer, but letting customers really feel that you know them and that you understand them in a way that other brands don't. And this, I mean, the realization of this came from visiting a Glossier store in New York, where it was like a really dead morning. It was, I think, winter, and nothing much was going on in all of the other shops that I went to. But the Glossier store, which was actually a hidden store, it was up in an office space, hidden away from the main drag, that was packed with customers who were all buying something. The store wasn't that different, but what is different for Glossier is that they understand their customers. They have a dialogue with their customers, which many brands still haven't really nailed. And because of that connection, that's why people buy from them.
And when you say they manage that, what is it that they're doing specifically to kind of create that bond between a brand and one customer?
Well, I think some of it comes from content. So Glossier actually started out as a blog where they weren't talking about product, they were just talking about all these different beauty products and what they liked and what they didn't, and what their customers liked and what they didn't. And through that, they realized that there was a gap in the market that they could fill. But a lot of the time, they just ask people what they think of the latest products, and what they want or what they don't want. So it feels very community driven.
Got it.
So it doesn't feel top down. We're telling you what to do. We're telling you what to buy. They're really letting the customer tell them what they want. And they're also, with all this content that they publish, they're giving people more reasons to interact with them than just buying.
Yeah.
But yeah, another really interesting brand that we've come across recently is Pietra. This is a company that makes it easy for any influencer or small entrepreneur to connect with really high quality factories and global logistics services all over the world. And so it means, well, if you or I had a massive following online, we could launch a product that would target or appeal to our audience really well. It would appeal to them more because if any influencer, I'm sure, with millions of followers actually knows what that audience wants, and then they can, offer really high quality products to them. So Pietra is helping people go beyond just slapping their logo on a t-shirt. You can start to have a really interesting sneaker range, or have a vegan sneaker range, or a range of supplements. Almost any product that you want to make, any product qualities, you will be able to find someone who can help you create that through Pietra. And so I think the future of retail belongs to, it's a bit sad to say it's about influencers, but it's more about those people or the brands who have visible, likable spokespeople who connect with their customers, and then possibly making the thing to sell off the back of that is easier. It's that relationship building part that's the harder part.
Yeah, I see that makes sense. And I was going to ask you, what kind of products? Is it just beauty, or is it? But by the sounds of it, then it's everything. It's getting me thinking whether my 300 Instagram followers, maybe I could start my own business.
You should try.
Yeah, I could try. I'll get in contact. I'm sure they'll tell me to try harder on Instagram first before I can do that. I think what would be interesting though, because if you're a retailer, you hear something like that, it's a little bit scary. The fact that someone can spin up a business. It's almost like, business as a service on the side, because you've got the relationship with the customer already. And, like you say, that is the hard bit to build. But if you were, and we've seen a lot of that, right? Like we've seen a lot of born from Instagram, especially beauty businesses that have taken the market by storm and done a very impressive job of growing very quickly. But if you are a larger beauty brand, more established beauty brand, and you have your stores, you have your network, do we think, is that purely something that's going to hold you back? Or is that something that you can grab hold of and harness and kind of use that as a competitive advantage against, a direct consumer born out of Instagram brand? What do you think? What do you think about that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, it can definitely be an asset. We also recommend to our clients that they think digital first to start with. I worry that a lot of retailers, because they have stores, they don't really think too much away from the store. Mm-hmm. Whereas if a retailer starts with a blank canvas and thinks about the different methods of interaction that they have at their disposal and what they might want to do with those, my feeling is that they wouldn't rely so much on the store as they do today. Yeah. So it's about using the physical space where it makes sense to do so, and where digital doesn't work as well, rather than sticking with the physical store, because you've got all these leases and that's how you think, how the company is structured, all of that. So. But of course, as we know, all these online brands are coming offline. It establishes a brand and brings it to life in a way that it makes customers believe in a brand, I think, in a way that they don't if it's online only.
Yeah.
So there are definite advantages to having it, but it's just not being wedded to that approach, I think.
Yeah. And it's interesting. If you look at the likes of Benedict Evans, for instance, and you look at the share in the US of, brick and mortar retail versus online, in everyone's head, everyone always thinks it's like 50-50 split of dollars spent. And actually, it's still a very, very surprising amount of store-based sales that still happen. Now, obviously, pandemic changed a lot of that. We saw like 5 years growth within 3 months, and it probably has changed the focus of a brand that is a multi-channel retailer and has to think of both. But on that, like their challenges that they've got to think about. I think I have a good in-store experience, and it's a relatively personal one. It's a relatively relevant one because one human's talking to another human, and they're able to establish a bit of a relationship, be it depending on the sort of like size of the store and size of the brand, but a bit of a relationship, and they can get to understand that customer in that moment and help them find what they need to find. Online, it's harder to do that, right? Like that's actually quite a difficult thing to do. So, do you think that e-commerce is close to mimicking an offline experience? Because right now, I think most big brands would say their in-store experience is better than their online. I think would be the general consensus. Do you think e-commerce is getting close to mimicking that or not?
I would argue that e-commerce can surpass the store experience. I'm really excited with what's possible in terms of digital first. So I don't think it needs to mimic it. I think there are some incredible advantages when brands think digital first. And a really simple example of this comes from Skin and Me. So they're a company that I can't say it. It's one of these retinoids. They have one of these prescription only super ingredients in the product that only a dermatologist is allowed to prescribe to you. But it's something like there's only 650 dermatologists or something in the UK. Like it's a freakishly low number. And that means that to go and see someone, to get an appointment with someone who can prescribe this super duper skincare to you can take a long time. And also because of that, and because they're having to hire offices and things, actually the product that you get at the end of it is very time consuming is very, very expensive. But there's, Skin and Me they invite their customers to take pictures of their face to complete a short questionnaire. And then a dermatologist remotely reviews all of that and will post the perfect personalized skincare to you a few days later. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I did this. I took my pictures. I don't know why I did this, but I took the pictures of my face at 11 o'clock at night on a whim because I'd seen a Google ad and it sounded interesting. So I did it all, like a really weird time. And because I was really busy around that point, I realized that it wasn't a case of which dermatologist shall I visit. It was a case of either getting it through the internet or not at all.
Yeah.
And it's a lot cheaper as well. So, I mean, that's kind of a basic example, but there's no reason why Skin and Me can't go global, so much faster than a brand that relies on stores. Would you like another example?
That's really interesting though, because in that example, that's, we're talking about earlier on about, retail as logistics, retail as tastemaker or brand, however you want to separate those two things. That's almost a little bit like a really good blend of the two there, because the logistics part of it was like your access to something like that, potentially cheaper, easier, but then it's a super personalized and almost tastemaker experience actually at the other end, because you get something that's completely just for you. And you genuinely feel like the brand is doing something for you and not this kind of, we get it quite a lot, like this kind of pretend personalization where it's like actually for huge segments of people and it's not really for that person. So I think that's a good example of and I haven't seen that before, where the two things can blend quite nicely together.
Yeah. And the packaging's amazing. by the way.
Which is very,
And that's all
part of the
personalized as
experience.
well.
Yeah, all
Yeah,
part of the
yeah.
experience.
Yep.
We talk. We're on the topic of personalization now, and obviously that's a huge part of what Coveo does. That's on everybody's lips as a retailer at the moment. We'll do the obvious thing, which is how do we define personalization? And do you have a definition for it? Because it can mean so many things to different people. So I'm interested to hear your take on it. I'll give you my take on it as well. But what would you go for as a definition?
Mine's pretty ridiculously simple. Does it feel personalized? Like if I walk in, or if I walk into a space, or I log onto a website or whatever, does what I'm seeing feel personalized? That's it. How would you define it?
I think people can see straight through something that isn't, and I think that's the point you're making there, right? And I would probably go with a bit more of a technical one, but it's what I've lived and breathed for a long time, and it's kind of close to my heart. But I think it's when a brand uses some information about a customer that's obviously been willingly given across to change the experience that they would have had otherwise. So that's like my broadest version of how I think you define personalization, because you're using information about them to change the experience. And as soon as you do that, and that goes on a massive scale, because you can use one tiny bit of information, you can use amalgamation of different pieces of data that give you a better picture of that customer and give them an even more personalized experience. And that goes all the way through to product as well. But when I'm thinking from an experience point of view, it's what data is used to make my experience more personalized, frictionless, effortless, and what I want it to be. And we know that consumers really want it, but I think that a lot of the time people talk about it and say they're doing it, and actually don't tend to do it that much at all. I don't know about you, but I've definitely been on a lot of retailers' websites, and outside of retail as well. It doesn't matter where it is within the e-commerce world, where everything feels very vanilla, very bland, and I don't think they're using any information that they could get from me to personalize my experience. Have you seen the same thing?
Yes. And I think I completely agree with you. I think we're saying the same thing. You're just saying it more eloquently than me. But yeah, I think when I say something feels personalized, it's almost like as a consumer, you can feel the benefit of it being personalized.
Yeah.
So it takes you to something that you want faster. And I'm still really excited about the potential in personalization, because I think we can get to a point where advertising won't feel like advertising anymore. Because right now, advertising still doesn't feel exciting to the customer. I think, everyone wants to block ads because they see it as a drain of their time and headspace. Whereas I keep thinking, wouldn't it be amazing if all adverts were useful to you, that you just saw stuff, you're like, oh, I want that. That solves a problem that I have. And I mean, Instagram does this a bit for me, actually. So there are good experiences out there. I guess Instagram has a huge amount of information, which some retailers don't. But it doesn't have to be invasive. Like, it can help the customer and help brands. But I think they just need a bit more help in getting there.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of those things where, yes, everyone talks about it a lot, and some people do it very well, but they normally hone in on a particular area of personalization. It could be a personalized product. It could be personalized advertising, like you just mentioned. It could be a personalized way of finding the right products. But actually, there's a whole spectrum of customer experience out there that needs to be personalized at most points. And there'll be different people that are better at doing certain elements of it. And that probably depends on the brand, depends on their focus, the kind of product that they sell. But yeah, I totally agree that there's a lot still to be done in the world of personalization. And I think customers are still feel a little bit underwhelmed by what's there. You spoke about it before, and I really like the concept of expectation setting is done outside of retail. Like that, your number one experience competitor is not Amazon. It's your Spotify. The fact that, I'm going to get the whole home screen of my app looks nothing like my brother's or my sister's. And it sends me like a 2021 wrapped up that's all about me and what I've listened to, and it tells me about my taste. And so it's completely, obviously built by machines, that's fine by me, but it's completely built for me. And I think that's a very different experience to what you can get from a retailer, right? But my expectations are definitely being set outside of that realm.
I think Spotify is the one to beat, actually.
Yeah.
Or a human stylist, perhaps.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's phenomenal. When I go on my daily mix, it's phenomenal how much I like off that list now.
Yeah.
And it's such a useful service.
Yeah, it's great. It kind of takes, you could never as a average human scour the entire sort of like plethora of music out there. You want someone to help. That's exactly what it is. Like, you want someone to help you find that thing. The same way you want the right ad if you're looking for something. It's just most of the time, because it's not personalized, you get sort of so much stuff thrown at you that it all becomes noise, which is a shame. Kind of on this topic of personalization and this area that we're talking about now. So have you seen anyone within retail? So obviously retail is a very broad spectrum. Have you seen anyone, or any sectors rather, change at different paces? Like, is fashion faster moving than grocery? Or are department stores better at X, Y, Z? Have you seen any differences between those groups?
Yes. So I think for those brands who have younger customers, they're going to be changing faster. For those brands who also have outposts or a footprint in Asia, they're going to be changing faster as well. Companies that have higher price points are going to be changing faster too. So yeah, you can kind of slice things in different ways. And obviously if you're a premium brand who solely focuses on Gen Z in China, then you're going to probably be changing at the fastest rate.
Yeah.
And maybe, I'm not sure actually if the value of the product matters, because beauty does seem an incredibly fast moving space, but also we've seen some really interesting changes within how people are selling furniture or cars. So possibly those bigger ticket items, brands are realizing that there are big benefits to improving the experience for those categories too.
Yeah. It's almost what you're saying there is like, sometimes the consumer can pull the brand along. Like, it's almost like they're the propulsion. It's like their expectations are here, we have to meet them. And so therefore the brand orientates themselves around what they need. Yeah. And I think you definitely can see it with high ticket items. There's a lot of brands that have really seen a huge surge in how much they're being bought recently, because there have been younger people buying high ticket items for different brands. Like, my thought comes to mind is trainers and sneakers. Balenciaga was everyone who was at the age of like 19 wanted Balenciagas, even though they're £600. So what's that, like $850 shoes? And it's to me, it's madness. I would never spend that kind of money on a trainer and a sneaker. But it became like they were pulled along by that consumer group and they wanted that thing, and that has continued now for a while. And it's probably just fast tracked those businesses into a particular way of thinking going forward.
Yeah, I heard those kids trade their sneakers. So they buy them and resell them to earn more money for luxury sneakers. So it sounds,
I've heard the
like
same.
they're
Depop.
earning more money than they would on a paper round. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. When everyone was doing those, they were dropping certain like styles of garment or a short release of something on a Thursday or whatever it was. Yeah, everyone would jump on it, try and buy it, and then they sell it on Depop for twice the money. So maybe they're just a very entrepreneurial bunch rather than a fashionable bunch. Well, Kate, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time and all of your insight. Wish you all the best, and we'll obviously chat again at some point and go into more detail on e-commerce. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for having me. It's been great.
Thank you for listening. To hear more, subscribe to the Ecom Edge podcast today. Listen to us wherever you get your podcasts.